one must be alert to dukkha. We should not lose sight of dukkha. It's not just the waking hours that we need to be alert to it. In a very subtle way, as we seek comfort and solace and relaxation, basically R&R, rest and relaxation for the body and the brain, what often happens is we're also looking to get away from dukkha in a very sneaky way. So we don't feel dukkha. We don't experience dukkha. We're running away, escaping from dukkha. And throughout the suttas we see how the Buddha makes it very clear that without dukkha, one cannot realize nibbāna. Now, again, this has to be clarified. It's not just the dukkha. Dukkha is experienced by every being on some level. But it is the awareness of the dukkha that makes dukkha a doorway, a pathway to awakening. That tiny little factor of being alert to dukkha, being able to see dukkha, being able to stay with dukkha in a way where it's like, I see you, instead of, I want to get rid of you, which is what every being wants. Even if you were living on Lake Como in northern Italy, in one of those beautiful villas, and you wake up to birds or geese floating around on the surface of the water, and you're seeing these beautiful vases of flowers, these plants that are hanging over and dipping like a willow tree all the way down and barely touching the surface of the water. You wake up to that and you're sipping your delicious espresso and you're like, ah, and you have more money than God in your bank. You don't owe anyone anything. People owe you. Yet you're experiencing dukkha. Because every day you look at yourself in the mirror and you notice an extra gray hair sprouting on your scalp. Or you're not allowed to walk around without a mask. It could be anything. Or it could be a person who is suffering tremendous dukkha because he is realizing that the neighboring country is sending mercenaries from northern Syria so that they can come and pillage and kill and rape and destroy and skin. I just heard the other day of a young Armenian soldier who was skinned alive and then killed, simply because he was defending his country from being invaded by these jihadists, by these hired guns by the Azerbaijanis. That is a superlative level of dukkha. Now, how much alertness has been there? In either of these cases, there are two extremes, of course. One is a matter of survival, absolute survival in the 21st century. The other one is, as long as the person is experiencing the dukkha. But my hope is that there is not the presence of the common denominator of delusion or careless awareness. That's again the same thing. Delusion can also be called ayoniso manasikara, which is unwise attention, which is another form for carelessness or neglect, or basically being unaware. So it is a great opportunity for the mind to jump into this light speed type of level of, PhD level of intense dukkha on one hand. Now, do you need to experience that level of pain, dukkha, in order for you to turn it into a doorway for awakening to happen? No, of course not. These are factors that take place. Usually karmic variables are there, factors of karma, or sometimes it's just the intentions of bad, evil people. And yes, they do exist. Evil people do exist. Evil beings do exist. Bad people doing bad things, saying bad things, thinking bad things. They exist. So sometimes it just starts with them, having nothing to do with your karma. You just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, as far as, this picture goes. So dukkha is a very quick way of realizing nibbāna. And what I mean by that, the mechanics of it can be seen something like this, viewed in this way, could be in one of the ways at least. The mind does not take that experience happening to either their emotions or their psychology or their body as an identification. This is happening to me. This is happening to my people. This is happening to my family. This always happens to me. I never get to have a perfect day on Lake Como. Why is that? Even if I'm living in a palace, I have 10 butlers and, attendants on me all the time. But still the person views it as an identification, feels discomfort, dissatisfaction, or pure hardcore pain, suffering, like I mentioned about that young Armenian soldier who was skinned alive. Now, one of these two examples, of these two extremes, is still an opportunity, because there is identification as well with the experience. As you're holding on to it. There is a sense of being caught in this situation, and there's also the gratification of holding on to it, and this and then letting go of it, or not having it be with you. Suddenly, you just hold on to that. The quintessential moment of when you remove very tight shoes, for example, after walking for a long time, or wearing them for a while. And then we want to hold on to that. The image of something that wasn't there, that you sought, you were after, longing for it, and now you have it. Now you jump to that, and now you identify with that. So, when I mentioned about dukkha being a doorway to awakening, the steps to be involved in this process of awakening using dukkha involve this sense of disengagement from this experience happening to me. Now, in order for us to be able to pause for a millisecond and looking at this requires a solid, sturdy level of awareness. Before we disengage, we need to pause. And we need to see the process. What's happening? Just that tiny little step. The Buddha called it sati. And to go deeper into it, it's yoniso manasikara. It's wise attention. You're now attending to it. Attending to what? Attending to the dukkha experience happening in this process. It's a dukkha process. And the person is participating in that the moment there is an identification. But so long as he's not doing that and he's looking at this process, then suddenly there is a seeing. There's a seeing of what is taking place. And there's levels of this. Vipassana, for example, seeing on this deep level, is what this is after. They call it insight meditation, but it's beyond. In English, insight, the word insight is not appropriate to my understanding. But it is what we use often. So, but it's very experiential. So once the person disengages, they start to see dukkha as dukkha, not my dukkha. Why is dukkha happening to me kind of dukkha? They start seeing, oh, I have to carry this body. I have to take care of it. And if I don't, I have to wash it every so, often. I have to shave it. I have to do this. I have to do that. And if I don't, if I'm living in a society, I'm going to get in trouble. So coming back to the earlier part of this talk on the dukkha, many people go to sleep hoping to get rid of dukkha, to kind of go into a willful coma, willful, intentional coma from dukkha, because it's easier in their mind. At least they're going to go into this, into this hit, drug, or anesthesia, or something that will get their minds off of it, intoxicate themselves with sleep. But what is intoxication? The fifth precept that we take every day. Sura merayama japamadhatana veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. What we're doing is we're basically saying, I don't want to be exposing the mind, the brain, the body, my awareness, basically, to any intoxicants. And sleep can become an intoxicant if it is being sought as a way of escape. The Buddha would sleep sometimes less than 3 hours. Now, I'm not advocating for that for anyone. It's a gradual process. The body needs rest. Don't get me wrong. Of course it does, to need to sleep. Yes. But when the person is sleeping with the full understanding that they're not running away from dukkha. Meaning, even if the person is sleeping 5 hours, 6, 8, 9 hours, whatever it is, and the mindfulness is there whenever, they're transitioning, going from state to state. Let's say REM to, like even when they're going into lucid state. If the mindfulness has been holding hands with them throughout the day, chances are mindfulness is still holding hands with them. Meaning, if you're tossing and turning and you notice like your back is hurting, or your arm is misplaced, it's like a pretzel pose and there's not enough blood circulation. Instead of treating that with delusion, it's part of dukkha, remember? So, not losing sight of dukkha in that sense would mean, oh, look at this body. Oh, it's still in pain. And more importantly, look at the mind looking at the body. The mind is saying, when am I ever going to get enough sleep where I could just go ahead and just sleep it off and get up and feel so refreshed? Which is another form of escape. Versus someone who would look at it and say, look at this, it's interesting how the brain, the mind is still trying to look for the other. Then dukkha, the blissful state. Basically refusing to see that there's dukkha. Which is ignorance, delusion, carelessness. Ayoniso manasikara. In that sense, your attention is on something that is, unwise. Your attention is unwise. You're looking at something else, focusing your attention on something else, which in this case could be seeking to sleep. Why can't I get enough sleep? Thought. Versus, I'll fall asleep when the body does. Let me look at this process. Meanwhile, as I drift into sleep. Which means that you are practicing sati, which brings clear comprehension, which means that you can have insights even while you're asleep or sleeping. In other words, what am I saying? The whole life process can become a doorway for awakening if there is the right amount of awareness throughout, instead of some part of the day or the night being dedicated to the absence of it. The absence of awareness or sati, it being the dukkha. Now, if a person is living life like that, every moment is a perfect moment to experience, to enter into nibbāna. That's why when you hear about a certain bhikkhuni or a bhikkhu or someone who's been with their object, meaning the mind, all day, all night, and you read how, let's say, this person was walking and all of a sudden they heard the rooster call early in the morning, or they were blowing out a candle or the wick of the lamp at night before they went to sleep, and boom, at that moment, full nibbāna, final nibbāna, just boom. Not final nibbāna like when a person dies, they say. It's, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the full scale awakening of arahantship. Occurs in these very seemingly insignificant, seemingly mundane moments of their lives. So while you're doing your thing in the bathroom, it could occur. If the mind has been trained to stay with dukkha, to stay with the mind going through its fluctuations, that is always being triggered by life, by the six sense doors coming in and bringing in stuff, information. Majority of which takes with the sixth sense, which is the mind, interpreting all these information, data points that are coming in through the five senses, interpreting it and taking it personally. But the only way that the person can know these things is if the mindfulness is holding hands with dukkha. Whenever it occurs, it's always there. It's like a camera, it's like a CCTV that's always on, with infinite amount of, I don't know, data recording and power. Observing. So that would be, for now, I think, enough for this morning.